Hey everyone. Well, I hope you all are having a wonderful weekend, and this is day 2 of our Mythbusters on the big ugly bill. So let's break it down. As you recall, yesterday we talked about what a debt bomb this bill is. It puts into place $4 trillion in deficit spending, including both the deficit spending on the new spending and tax breaks for billionaires and corporations that are in the bill, and the debt service or interest that we're going to have to pay on that debt itself. Now, what is it all doing this in service of? It's helping Donald Trump and the GOP's donors and buddies and the tax promises that they made to the ultra rich. Now, they are trying to claim that in addition to that, they're making a large tax break for working families. But that is the first myth that we want to break down today. Because what is clear in this bill is that it redistributes wealth from working families to the ultra rich. In fact, the CBO score shows that the rich are going to get 4% richer and the low income people of this country are going to get 4% poor. And here's why. Because the tax breaks for the ultra rich and the corporations in this bill are permanent. In fact, when they passed many of these tax breaks in 2017, they knew that they were going to be a debt bomb. And that is why they set sunset provisions that made them go away actually this year. But one of Donald Trump's promises that he made to his ultra wealthy donors was that he would reauthorize those tax breaks and even expand them. And not only did they do that, they made it permanent. Now, when it comes to working families, there is still a reauthorization of some of those 2017 working family tax incentives, but for the vast majority of working families in America, you're not going to see any change, because if you've been taking those tax exemptions or getting those tax rebates for the last several years, you're largely going to see your income and tax look very similar. Now, ultimately, at the end of the day, the CBO shows that low-income families are losing under this bill, and that is because not only are those tax breaks not expanded for working families, but in many cases they sunset, and in addition to that, we know that our working families, because of the cuts to Medicaid, food assistance, housing, and educational assistance in this bill, are actually going to see their costs go up. And that is coupled on top of the already inflationary impacts of this bill because of the deficit spending in it. So it is false. It's a myth. This bill is not going to make lives better for working Americans. In fact, it's going to make it harder. Secondly, the Trump administration is trying to claim and going all over the country claiming that they cut tax on Social Security. This is one of the major campaign promises that Donald Trump made. That is false. That is a lie. The tax section of this bill does not even mention Social Security. Now, what is done in this bill is actually expand the basic exemption for seniors. That's awesome. We love that. We support that. That's an important provision, especially for folks who are on a fixed income. Now, for low-income seniors, you may not see a significant change in your tax liability because you were probably already taking the maximum exemption. And for upper-income seniors, you're probably going to see more tax come back because of the other provisions in this bill. So there is a sliver of folks who may see additional tax refund in their taxes because of this provision, but it has nothing to do with Social Security. That is a lie, and the fact that the Trump administration used the official resources for a campaign-like email under the Social Security Administration to propagate a lie is absolutely wrong. Now, secondly, Donald Trump tried to campaign on the idea that he would eliminate taxes on cash tips and eliminate taxes on overtime. I support both of these things. However, that is not actually what this bill does. What the bill does do is for individuals who work in an industry that make cash tips, if you report all of your tips, you pay taxes on it, you can now claim an exemption up to a certain amount for some of those cash tips. That's it. Now, if you work in the industry, whether working as a bartender or a server or a driver or any industry that depends on tips, I think a lot of people understand that many people are not actually reporting all of their tips. So now, in order to actually get this exemption, you're going to have to pay taxes on all of those tips and then take an exemption afterwards. So That's what it is. Now, let's talk about tax on overtime. There are lots of Americans who are working ungodly hours all over the United States who deserve to have tax relief. Absolutely support every single family who is hardworking, trying to get by in this world. We're talking police officers, we're talking firefighters, we're talking first responders, people all across different industries. But at the end of the day, and this one actually makes me really angry, they didn't put a tax exemption for all of the overtime. It's only for the dollar amount over your base pay, and it's only up to a few $1,000s. And on top of that, not only is it only a small amount of tax relief, they made it expire in just a couple of years. So while they made tax breaks for billionaires permanent and cost the American taxpayers $4 trillion to do that, they couldn't even give permanent tax relief to middle-class families. I think that's shameful. So finally, I want to talk about the implications of this bill overall for working families. Part of why this bill is so catastrophic is because of the cuts that it makes to healthcare, to food assistance, to housing, to education. And one of the big myths that a lot of people are talking about right now is that the Republicans cynically set the start date for those provisions after the election next year. They did. They absolutely did. But what folks have to understand is that our communities are going to feel those implications sooner, because hospitals and clinics are going to have to find $1 trillion in money in the system or cut it out of the system in order to address these cuts. That means that health insurers are possibly going to drop folks who can't afford insurance. They're not going to be providing healthcare benefits that they were providing previously. It means that clinics and hospitals, especially in rural areas, could start to shut down sooner than later due to the cost of operations. We know that states across the country are starting to think about special sessions, because in order to make up the shortfall in the SNAP benefits that got cut by the federal government, they're going to have to make up that funding through the state budget, which means if they're paying for food assistance through the state budget, they're going to have to take money from somewhere else. So that could impact services not only around food assistance, but all across the board in states that are heavily impacted. In terms of food assistance, we're talking about millions of Americans, including millions of children, that are going to lose access to school breakfast, school lunches, families that are served currently by food assistance SNAP programs who could be looking at trying to get their food assistance through food banks and state programs for which there just is not the infrastructure. So we know that states, local food assistance programs are already scrambling to figure out how to address that need. And educational institutions, both colleges and community colleges, are having to face the reality that there were massive cuts in this bill to Pell Grants, student loan programs, and other grant and assistance programs that are going to affect enrollment, operational costs, and frankly, the bottom line of universities and educational institutions, which means that if you're planning to go to school or you're in the middle of your education, you could see impacts sooner as colleges try to figure out how to navigate what happened in this bill. So the idea that this bill is not going to actually cause any problems or pain or hurt for the American people until after the election is just not true. So those are some of the big myths that we wanted to break down. At the end of the day, these are some of the biggest reasons why I not only voted no, but a hell no on this bill. And tomorrow we're going to break down what this bill means for national security and protection of the homeland, and for its implications for energy in the environment. But until then, I hope you guys have a happy rest of the day.